Good morning, Algebra 2. We are going to cover lesson 58 on completing the square. So completing the square is an alternative method to solving quadratics. It does involve factoring, but it is useful for much later. Like we will use this for other things in both trig and here for conic sections and such. So I'm going to teach you a new method to solving a quadratic today. Now, when we're completing the square, the whole goal is to create a perfect square trinomial. And I'm going to go over what that is. Remember, trinomial just means that it has three terms. And the word perfect square means that they are, well, I have no word to write. Perfect square means they are identical factors. A perfect square in numbers is like 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared is 16. Those are perfect squares like 4, 9, 16, 25, 81, 36, 49. Those are perfect squares because they have a pair of identical factors. So a perfect square trinomial is a trinomial that has also identical factors. For example, the factors of this first one are x plus 2 times x plus 2. Now notice those factors are identical, and I can also write them as x plus 2 squared. Okay. This next one, a factor of 3 that will give us a sum of 6 is x plus 3 times x plus 3, which can also be written as x plus 3 squared because my factors are identical. For this third one, factors of 25, that'll give us a sum of negative 10x, would be x minus 5 times x minus 5, which can be written as x minus 5 squared because the factors are identical. So when I'm completing the square, I'm trying to create a trinomial that has identical factors. So we are going to jump right in, and I probably should tell you that the lesson practice is on page 416, and so here we go. So part A says to solve x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 36. Now this one is kind of already started for us, so we're just going to kind of pick up where it left off. And I want to make sure I have another example to use. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is I notice that this left-hand side can be factored perfectly. So I'm going to factor it. I got a positive 1 and a negative 2. So my factors are negative 1 and negative 1. So I'm going to write that as x minus 1 times x minus 1 equals 36. Now I notice that these factors are identical, so I'm going to rewrite this to be x minus 1 squared equals 36. Now from here I can easily solve this. In order to get rid of the squared, I would have to take the square root. And so pay attention to a couple things. I get x minus 1 equals plus or minus, right? The square root of a positive number has 2 answers. And that is not how you spell the word. Has 2 answers, a positive and a negative, because the square root of 36 equals negative 6 squared or positive 6 squared. So you should have 2 answers. When you solve, there should be a positive answer and a negative answer. Don't forget that. Also, a quadratic has up to 2 solutions because the degree is 2. So you should have up to 2. Sometimes we'll only have 1, but for all of these we should have, well, for most of these we should have 2 solutions. So I simplified the left. The square root of 36 is 6. Now I still have to get x by itself, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I want you to see my two solutions. I have positive 6 plus 1, because I added 1, and I have a negative 6 plus 1. So my two solutions are 7 and negative 5. So x equals 7 and negative 5. You can write it all together. Okay, so notice I have two solutions. This is a positive 6. That's where this is. And then I have a negative 6. And notice then I added 1 to both sides. So I have two solutions. So let's try part B, which is set up the same. X squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 6. Now, I'm going to go ahead and try factoring this left-hand side. So I have 64 and 16. That would give me 8 and 8. Okay, so I factored the left-hand side. So that is x plus 8 times x plus 8 equals 6. Now, this can be rewritten, right? These are both positive 8s as x plus 8 squared equals 6. Now this one's going to be slightly different because in part A, 36 had a nice square root. I don't have a nice number on the right hand side, but I'm still going to use the square root to solve. So I'm taking the square root of both sides to get rid of that squared. So I get x plus 8 equals a plus or minus square root 6. Now I'm leaving the square root of 6 because the square root of 6 is 3 times 2, and neither of these are perfect squares. Now I know we'd get a decimal in our calculator if I took the square root of 6, but I'm just going to leave it, and I'm going to show you how to write your answers. I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, and I'm going to go over how to write our answer. You want to write the part that looks normal first. So minus 8. And then for one of them, I'm going to write positive square root 6. Okay? And for the other one, I'm going to write the other possibility, a negative square root 6. These are the solutions. You could also write negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 6. You choose, but notice the real part goes first, and on a state test or on your final, if it's multiple choice, more than likely they will list them separately. So the normal thing goes first, and our square roots or we haven't gotten there yet, will go second. All right, so moving on. And C in our book asks us to complete the square and factor the resulting perfect square trinomial for x squared minus 20x. So this is where we get into the actual steps of completing the square. In order to complete the square, you're going to take your b term, and you're going to cut it in half or divide by 2, and then you're going to square it. So in this case, a is 1 and b is negative 20. Okay, so my b term is negative 20. So in order to complete this square, I'm going to take negative 20, I'm going to cut it in half or divide it by 2, and I'm going to square that. Parentheses first, people, so negative 20 divided by 2 is negative 10. 10 squared is a positive 100. So I would add 100. Okay, now I can factor. Okay, so I've got a positive 100 and a negative 20. So remember, I need these to be identical, right? The whole point is to create identical factors. So negative 10 times negative 10 is a positive 100. And negative 10 plus negative 10 is negative 20. So my factors are x minus 10 times x minus 10 or x minus 10 squared. And I believe that is all complete the square and factor. Yep, that's all it wanted in part C. Now, we're going to use this whole process in a couple problems. I'm going to go ahead and give us one that is not in the book. And I'm kind of disappointed that they only gave you ones that are perfect squares. Okay, I'll just make one up. I'm going to do an example of how to go from like step 1 all the way through. So we're going to solve the following. And let's do some more difficult ones. So let's do x squared plus 14x minus 8 equals 0. Now, I'm going to kind of do, I'm going to do it my way, if that makes it easy on you. All right, so if I'm going to solve by completing the square, I know just by looking at this that there is no factor of negative 8 that's going to add up to be 14. I cannot factor this. So to complete this square, I'm going to isolate the a and b term. So step 1 is I'm going to move c. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides because I can't factor him. So I'm going to go ahead and move c to the other side. So that is step 1 right here. So I'm going to rewrite what I have, x squared plus 14x. I'm going to leave a space equals positive 8. Step 2, I'm going to do b divided by 2 squared, okay? And so my b term, right, is 14. So 14 divided by 2 squared is 7. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. Now I have to add that here. Now whatever I do to the left, I have to do to the right, right? That's what an equal sign means. It means that you treat each side equally. So if you do something to one side of the equation, you have to do it to the other. So the next step is to factor the trinomial. Remember, trinomial, like a tricycle, means you have 3 terms. So I am factoring. So sorry, this was step 2. Here is step 3. I'm factoring the 49 and the 14. I'm factoring the trinomial. Okay, and so factors of 49 that add up to be 14 would be 7 times 7. So x plus 7 times x plus 7 equals, I'm going to go ahead and add these together. I have a positive 8 and a positive 49, so that should be 57. Now I have x plus, I can rewrite this, right, as x plus 7 squared equals 57. So step 4 is to then solve for x. So in order to solve, hopefully you remember, I have to take the square root. Okay. So that gives me x plus 7 equals, remember, plus or minus. Now 57 is the same as 57 divided by 3 is just 3 times 19. 57 divided by 9, I also can't simplify. So because I can't simplify it, I'm going to leave it. So I have the square root of 57. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to write it as a decimal, but I am going to write my answer properly. I would subtract 7. And so I'm going to write the real part first, negative 7, and then I have a plus or minus the square root of 57. Now remember, this can also be written, so this is one way to write your answer, or you could say x equals negative 7 plus the square root of 57 and negative 7 minus the square root of 57. You can choose to break them up or keep them together. Okay, so that was step 3. All of this was step 4. Okay, try to label my steps for you. We are going to do that again in part D of our lesson practice. So let's practice all of that again. We're going to solve x squared plus 26x minus 2 equals 0. Now the reason I'm completing my square is because I cannot there's no factor of 2, right? The only factor of 2 is 1 times 2. That is not going to add up to be 26. So to factor the square, step 1, right, is to move c. So step 1, I'm going to move the c term to the other side, and I'm going to rewrite my work. So x squared plus 26x equals 2. Step 2, I'm going to find the term that's going to complete the square. So I take the b term divided by 2 squared. That gives me 13 squared, which is 169. So I'm going to be adding 169 to both sides. And I should have done, I'm going to try to do my steps in a different color. Okay, and so now I'm going to rewrite the left by factoring it. I have 169 and 26. If you take the square root of 169, you get 13. So 13 times 13. So 13 times 13 is 169. 13 plus 13 is 26. So now I'm going to rewrite, that was step 3. So my factors are x plus 13 times x plus 13 equals 171. I can rewrite the left, right, as x plus 13 squared equals 171. And that looks like a B. I'm just going to change the way my 13 looks. Okay. So step 4 now is to solve. And so I'm going to take the square root. And that leaves me with x plus 13 equals plus or minus 171 divided by 3. Let's see, 171 divided by 9. Now I can simplify 171. 171 equals 9 times 19. This is true. And the square root of 9 is 3. So I get 3 root 19. And so that is what I'm going to write right here. So I simplified to get this. Okay, I simplified the square root. Now the last step to get x by itself would be to subtract my 13. Sorry. Right, because I need x by itself. So x equals, I'm going to write negative 13 first, and then the plus or minus 3 root 19. Notice I did not break up this weird looking stuff. So plus or minus root 13 is stayed together, but that is my answer. Negative 13 plus or minus 3 root 19. All right, last one, and it's not a fun one. So they'd like us to complete the square for the following. I have h equals negative 16t squared plus 20t. Now, this complicates, well, really everything. And they'd ask us to find the time, so they'd like us to plug 4 in for h. Now, I can only complete the square if a is 1. I cannot complete the square if I have anything in front of my t squared. So in order to complete the square, the a term has to be 1. So I have to actually get rid of 16. I'm going to divide, or I'm going to factor out negative 16 from each term. And I'm going to rewrite this. So that gives me t squared minus, I'm going to reduce this. This can be reduced to 5 over 4t. And then I have equals negative 1/4. Right? 4 over negative 16. Everything can be reduced. Now I'm going to complete this square. So I have to do negative 5/4 divided by 2 squared. And we multiply by the reciprocal when we divide, right? 5/4 times 1 over 2 squared, so that would be negative 5 over 8. Squared would be 25 over 64. So that is what I'm adding to both sides. So I'm adding 25 over 64. Oh, why did I write 26? To both sides. I'm going to factor. So 25 over 64 and negative 5 over 4. You got to know how to operate fractions, but I'm assuming you do because you're all the way into Algebra 2. So this should be 5/8 and 5/8, and they're both a negative. Now 2 5/8, if you add those together, you get negative 10 over 8, which can be reduced to be negative 5 over 4. So you have to be able to work with fractions, okay, in this class, but you can do it. So this is t minus 5/8 squared equals, I have to make this a common denominator, right? So this is 4 times 16. So this is negative 16/64 plus 25 over 64. That leaves me with 9 over 64. And that's not going to be scary because here I go to take the square root. And I get t minus 5/8 equals plus or minus. The square root of 9 is 3. And the square root of 64 is 8. Look how beautiful. So I'm going to add the 5/8. So I have a plus 3/8, a positive 3/8 plus 5/8, and I have t equals a negative 3/8 plus 5/8. Right, because I'm adding 5/8 to both sides. So this gives me 8 over 8, which is 1. This gives me 2/8, which equals 1/4. So my answers are 1 and 1/4. And that completes our section, except for I'll tell you what to skip on the homework. On the first page, I kind of ran out of room on this section, but we are going to skip for homework. We are going to skip numbers 6, 7, 10, 11, 19, 22, and 23. Thank you.